Today's guest is Brionna Mayo. She is a data architect at Smart Synergies. And Brionna has a lot of experience in the DoD contracting community, which is near and dear to my heart as a veteran and as somebody who also worked in DoD contracting. And we met through our shared love of networking in the DC area. We're not actually sure which event it was, but I am so looking forward to learning more about you on the podcast today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on your platform.
So, for those who want you need to hear a bit more about you, talk about your background. Where are you from, and who you are, and what you do.
Okay, I am originally from here, Maryland, PG County specifically. I grew up here all of my life. Also lived in DC for a while. I went to school at Bowie State University and studied database administration and development, which is a story.
All
So
right.
I actually went in and, you have advisors and then they tell you what you should do. And they say you should do network security. I said, okay, I did network security. I ended up having being a research assistant to one of my professors. And I was in her lab. We had 3D printing, so I was doing all this stuff. We had an entire project of building out a medical bottle that
Mm.
will automatically dispense. So people that are elderly and you may forget, it will automatically do that for you. So we was in the process of doing that. And she grabbed me. She came into the lab. She grabbed me. She said, "You going downstairs?" I said, "I ain't even finished what I did." She said, "Naval Research Lab is downstairs."
Ooh.
So she grabbed me, to literally forced me because when I'm in the zone, I'm in the zone. And I went there. I signed up. Ended up getting an internship. 2014, the summer. I was a mentee underneath a software engineer and doing C++, plus plus. The worst thing to do in life. Woo! At the end of my internship, there was another supervisor there. He wasn't supervising me, but we would have daily conversations. And he said, "You know what? I want to hire you."
Oh, wow.
I get hired October of 2014 with the Naval Research Lab, also sponsored for my clearance. Mind you, I'm still in college.
Wow.
So I'm working part to full time. It was hourly, so I can, choose my hours and make my schedule. Putting myself through school, paying for my classes. So I already had that experience. But I say that to say this: I came in as a network security background. My supervisor, literally at the Naval Research Lab, he said, "You remind me of myself. I think you will like data better."
Mm.
He put me on a project as someone who didn't know nothing about it that was with the Naval Research Lab, the Army Research Lab, and one more person. And the way it just clicked for me, the first thing I had to learn was PostgreSQL. And mind you, we was doing a lot of Linux-based environments anyway. So I learned Python on the job because we didn't learn that at school yet. So doing a whole bunch of scripting. So I was learning fast. So so after like a month of doing that, I went back to my advisor. I said, "I'm changing my major." I changed it to database administration development, and it's just been great. Um, when I say it just works for me,
Yeah.
it just mentally makes sense for me. So that's a little bit of my background. I'm a data geek.
So I wonder that first internship, C++, plus plus, that's a rough language to start. That is so rough. I was a software engineer. I never want to touch C++ plus plus again, ever. Do you think that though that experience though contributed to how much easier it might have been to pick up on some of the other languages?
Yes. So learning C plus plus, my God. But Python was such a breeze after that because everything it's like human language. It's
Right.
easy,
Right.
easier to understand. But you already have a background to understand what functions are and definitions are,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
how to organize your script so you can call those functions. So it was easier to understand. But I was just so happy, just so this is Python. Thank you, thank you so much. You delivered me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and
so.
database languages are much simpler as well. I mean, I've done a lot of SQL and Oracle and Sybase development, and those languages are so much easier than something like C++ plus plus or some other higher. Actually, they don't. I don't think. I guess they don't call them higher level. They call them lower level programming languages, right? Because they're closer to the bottom.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely.
So then data science, how does data architecture come in? What does that mean? For somebody who may not have heard of a data architect, what does that mean in a day-to-day?
So I like to say, think of what an architect is. just a regular architect, they design buildings, right?
Mm,
So as a data architecture, we're designing systems that communicate with each other for the data flow. So from the start to finish in the storage. So if we get a raw data dump, okay, where are we going to place this originally? So one of the tools that I use often is Azure Databricks, right? So I'm going to store this within Azure first as a raw data dump for a original storage, then do all the business processing in Databricks, and then place the new data set refined in a new storage in order to pull from that and do all your analytics that you need. So as a data architect, we are literally just designers and making sure that each system communicate well with each other.
mm. And massaging the data to what, improve its quality,
Yes,
make connections between other data sources.
yes, data quality, data security, all of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very important role. I mean, I work in the federal government, and I'll tell you, I've heard more than once with the AI revolution that is now upon us, how critically important quality data that we understand its provenance, where it's from, what it's meant for, right? Don't misuse it. Are you finding as you do your work that it's kind of laying a foundation for other things?
Yes. So without us, nothing works. And I'm heavy on that. We are the bloodline for any business, right? Because we are to understand this data and then make it usable,
Mm,
right? And then also make sure we build out these systems and these pipelines. So while you're collecting data, it's automatically, going through the cleansing process, automatic. So it's an automatic process. So it won't be so much human error.
mm,
So coming from the DoD space, you know that they still use and like CSV files. And there's a lot of manual entry. So therefore there's a lot of human error,
yeah.
right? Rightfully so. And so what we do is build these systems so you won't have to rely on Excel like you love to or anything, right? Because I've also worked on a project with the U.S. refugee camp, and they have an Oracle database. And with that, over time, the longer a database ages and you have different teams come in, a lot of times there's a lot more human error. The business rules change. Then some of this older data is not updated. The database itself isn't updated. So now you have bigger issues that prolongs and prolongs. And so as a data professional, we are to see the microcosmic errors and issues within the data.
Mm. Yeah, I can see that, right? Come in, look at the challenges that a given data structure has, and then create a mechanism to transform it into a fresh data set. That's
Mhm.
extremely powerful. I have a couple people that work for me who do a lot of Power BI. I see all their data transformations. I don't want to have to figure that out. I'm not a data person. I can do coding, but I'm not a data person, and it's a completely different world. So uh, somebody has to be able to do that, and it's
Mhm.
critically important. Every day I'm learning more and more. My organization is relying on data for making decisions more so than I think ever before.
Yes, we need it. We need it a lot, and but we also need people. To me, if you're going to get into this field, I always say it's very important to already have an analytical mindset,
Hmm.
right? Because we're not looking at this data with emotions. We're seeing it as black and white, as ones and zeros, right? And we're seeing, okay, based off these business rules that you apply, because sometimes these business rules are not good when it comes to data integrity. And I'm heavy on data integrity, right? And making sure that your data is of quality, but it also is normalized across platforms. So if you're using something easy, if you're using timestamps within your data, make sure that these timestamps are the same across. A lot of times they change, right? Just something normal. Or if you're using states, like one of the things I noticed in some database where, or even on applications on the front end, where it's easier if when you're doing an application, if you select the United States as your country, then when you go to the state, it's not going to show you a town that's in the UK somewhere, right? So making sure that you can limit the amount of human error as well. And so we have to think like that. We
Hmm.
have to think from the side of a user who not going to think analytical. So if you get in this field, you have to already be able to see things from every angle.
So now, as you've gone through your career and moved from company to company, was there a philosophy that you leveraged for deciding when it was time to move to another company? Was it, uh, growth opportunity or new project or money, right? Money's not a bad reason. What was kind of your decision pattern for when you decided to move to another place?
Typically, I only move when the contract is coming up to an end. There
Okay.
was one time that I tried to stay doing a re-up and then they didn't get it. I vowed to not ever do that again. A lot of times you have hope, but so if once the contract's coming to an end, I typically move after
That's smart. I've worked in that space. I know exactly what you're talking about.
that.
I worked for a company and we didn't get the recompete and then I had to find a job at the same time they didn't have things for me to do. And that's a rough place to be.
Yes, I've been
Yeah, I
there.
don't think people understand that about government contracting, that we typically award a contract for set period of time. That company goes and hires all the resources needed to do the work that they're asked to do. And then every year they have to renew that contract, even if the contract, say the contract's for 5 years, which is the typical
Hmm.
government contract, 5 years. But every year they renew it, and they may choose not to.
Yep.
And then every 5 years, in that case, if it's a 5 year contract, they don't have a choice. They have to recompete it, and the same company may not win.
Hmm.
And then if the new company wins, they have the opportunity to hire the old staff, which is very interesting.
Yes. It's, I had a contract where when I had came on, I came on as a part of the subcontractor who just was the prime.
Hmm.
And now, now also leadership looks different because the contractor who was the sub is now the prime, and now they're taking leadership position. There's a lot of confusion.
Yeah,
Right? And that's another part of contract world. The reason why I guess I like it is because you get to touch a lot of different technology and you're not stuck on, the old way of things. You get to advance and try out new things. And I'm appreciative of that in my career.
that's amazing. Yeah, and that's a good thing to be appreciative for. So, Brianna, as you look back on your career, what's something you go, man, I wish we didn't do it that way. I wish somebody would come up with a more efficient or just a different way to do something that you ran into. And I'm going to caveat it and say, you and I aren't going to necessarily come up with a better way. It's really more about the conversation of what it was, and hopefully somebody then will hear this or and take some action and make some change. So and it could be more than one thing as well. But what's something looking back you go, man, I wish we did that differently.
There's a couple of things. One is the pipeline of growth
Hmm.
from if you go from school like I did into this field, or you go from a certification course. Once you enter into this space, whatever you learned is great, but you have to know how to communicate it, right? And so if you
Hmm.
come in as a junior DA data analyst, right, you still have to learn confidence of what you're speaking of. And I've been a part of teams with juniors who haven't yet gained the confidence that, and that's not a knock on you, right? We still need mentorship in this space to teach us how to navigate different spaces the higher you go up. And I think that's one thing I believe we can definitely do better is the pipeline of growth and also understanding this um a lot of times let's say you learned C++ or you learned Python or PL SQL in school. Now you go into a job and now it's just maybe just MS SQL, or now they want you to know
That's
R.
right.
And there's so many different technologies that you can't learn it all in school, right?
Yeah.
And we have to have the grace to say, okay, what is transferable? If you know Python, then you picking up R shouldn't be difficult,
Hmm. Hmm.
or if you know PL SQL or regular MS SQL, then you picking up PL SQL shouldn't be that difficult, right? And we have to give people the growth doing this pipeline. Even something in some entry level positions I've seen is just like that you need 3 to 5 years. I'm like, that's not entry level.
Hmm.
So that's one thing I believe we can definitely change. And I have another thing that really irritates me, and I talked about it on my TikTok. I've interviewed for jobs, honestly, not DoD related, but private entity for data positions. And one of them was, a restaurant company. And they told me because I didn't have restaurant experience in the data field, that I wasn't, and I've heard this, because if you don't have restaurant experience, if you don't have healthcare, I'm like, do you know what data is? Because it's because I'm thinking now a lot of hiring managers don't know what they're hiring for. Because if
Hmm.
you understand data, everything else becomes terminology, right? So if
Yeah.
I'm explaining this, okay, now if I'm doing, like, I come from doing a lot of financial stuff. So RIs and budgets and fiscal years and understand all that. But that's something you can learn on the job, and that's okay. So are we giving the grace now for people to learn on the job? And I
Mm.
believe that there's not enough of that happening, and you're expecting a 99% hit ratio with a candidate, and that's not right. So
Wow, I had not heard of that challenge from a hiring perspective. I've heard of, of course, the classic testing and testing and testing. Oh, go build this application and show me you can do it, which I am not a fan of. I think that's you're either going to hire me or you're not going to hire me through the
mhm.
conversation. This whole make me do free work thing, I'm not a big fan of. Um, but I had not heard that how specific. Like, I mean, you're right. If you know data technologies, you know the languages, or like you said, even knowing one language lets you quickly accumulate more
Yeah.
languages. I'd never heard that somebody said, "Well, you haven't worked in the restaurant industry, or you haven't worked in the healthcare industry. You haven't worked." I had never heard that before, and that is a shame because you're right. I mean, a data architect is a data architect is a data architect. I'm a software engineer. Every place I've ever worked, I had to learn the mission, whatever the mission
Mhm.
was, so that then I knew the right terminology and understood it. I didn't have to say, oh, we can only hire you because you know how to build a system for Army criminal defense. What? Who else would ever have done that, right?
Mhm.
That's so weird. Ugh, this world disappoints me.
It does. I just think you don't know what you're hiring for, or you don't understand the intricacies of what a data professional is.
Mm,
And so you want someone that comes with tangibles that should be preferred, maybe, but not a needed qualification.
hmm I like what you said about flexibility, if you will. People need to be flexible in the pipeline as they come into work, especially for those first few early jobs. I remember one time I worked for a small company. I think we were like, well, I was the third employee behind the husband and wife. And then we started hiring developers. And so we hired from college. George Mason was local. We put out some feelers to get, candidates from George Mason. And every single one of them learned a completely different language than what we were hiring them for. And we knew that going in. We're like, look, we're going to interview you on concepts. We just want to know that what did you get out of school? Do you know enough foundational stuff? Don't worry about the language. We're going to teach you the language. We're going to send you to classes for that specific language. And it was such a great experience. I loved being able to hire people straight out of college, their first job,
Hmm.
to go pour into them because I'd been doing my career at that point for long enough. I felt like I could mentor them. In fact, I'm still friends with almost everybody from that company. And But you're right, you have to have flexibility. Even in my own
Hmm.
career, I started out as a Microsoft VB developer. And then I had to learn Java and I had to learn C Sharp and I had to learn, SQL and T SQL and PL
Yes.
SQL. And I had
Yes.
to learn all those languages. And you just got to roll with it if you want to be employed, number one. And number two, you got to look at it as everything your employer makes you learn because you have a client that needs it is one more thing in your toolbox for
Yes.
your own career development.
Yes. And the higher you go doesn't mean you stop learning. When I
Yeah.
think of my career, start off with the Naval Research Lab, I knew nothing that I had to do, not a SQL, not a PostgreSQL, not a Linux,
Yeah.
installing Ubuntu, doing Selenium automation testing, designing an entire database. I had to do all that, but I had to learn it, but they gave me that freedom to learn on the job.
Yeah.
After that, I had to learn Tableau for another position. And within one of my last contracts with the Navy, I had to learn Power Apps.
Oh, there you go.
Right, do Power Automate, and it was something I like. It was so different. I was like, "What is this?" But it was so intriguing to me. But because you gave me the space to do it,
Mm,
right? And I just think no matter how far you go, I've been in this game for 10 years now, literally. So no matter how far you go up in your career, there's always something new. Nowadays, they're gonna want you to know AI and how to build a chat box or what a chat box is, whatever case may be. So are you willing to allow people the knowledge base of that? What are LLMs and how do they work? ML, right? Even if in a data space, if we have to pull some of that and understand the business behind that, right? So people still need that space just to grow.
agreed, agreed. And you're right. As we bring people in, we need to, as companies and as agencies, because since I work in the federal government space, we need to, at the leadership level, need to give them those tools as well, right, to succeed in whatever our current project is. So, yeah, totally agree with you. And yeah, we do need to do it better. We definitely need to do it better. Yeah, I mentor a lot of people, and that is a common complaint that the ramping up and coming into work process is still seriously hard for early career people. And I don't know why we have to make things so difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Too much gatekeeping. I'm going to use it. I'm going to say it. Too much gatekeeping.
Yes, 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 yes.
So. So, Brianna, what's coming up for you in the near future here?
Man, so there's a couple of things. I'm my career, I'm going towards being a director level.
Hmm.
And so that's where I'm trying to get to be the director of data engineering or data analytics for a company. I'm in the pipeline for a few things. So hopefully by by the release of this, you'll see my LinkedIn and it'll be this position.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I'm excited just to continue to progress in my career. Also, mentoring other people. A lot of people reach out to me, talk to me about, what should I do? I had one guy reach out to me today on TikTok. It was like, "Hey, should I learn Power BI and build a portfolio?" And I said, "Well, you can, but that's not the first thing you need to do. You need to show the prerequisites before you build that portfolio and building out a data model with ET and doing your ETL process." And
Hmm.
then you can show all the visuals because now it allows them to see you understand the back end framework and not just the front end, Q stuff. So,
Right. Oh, you can fake all kinds of stuff on the front
oh,
end, but it's really hard to fake a data transformation.
yes. I like, mentoring people who've had, to do that as well. It's kind of fun.
Well, Brianna, I hope you get that director position. I love your enthusiasm. I love your willingness to learn whatever it takes, and I think that's going to take you far in your career, and I can't wait to see it.
Thank you so much.